Hello, welcome to the Bread of Life channel. Today I just wanted to share the gospel, the good news about Jesus Christ, because really that is what this channel is about. And I've been doing a lot of interviews with people recently, and that's been great. I love it. But the purpose of this channel really is to make known who Jesus is and the salvation that he offers to the world. So I just wanted to do a stream today and talk about that and read from one of my favorite passages of the New Testament. One of my favorite things that Jesus said. I think I'm going to be joined by Robert Rowe from Sentinel Apologetics pretty soon. So whenever he shows up, that'll be great. But I just went over 6,000 subscribers. So thank you for those of you who have been faithful, loyal viewers of this channel. And as people are starting to become aware, I'm starting oh my gosh, what's wrong with me today? I'm doing Atheist of the Month. So I'm really thankful for all my Christian subscribers, and I want you to know that I appreciate you. But in the last few months, something has been happening with my channel where I noticed, YouTube shows you who watches your channel, like what other channels those people watch. And when I look at all the channels that people who watch my channel are watching, all of the channels are atheist channels like Apologia, Myth Vision, and these different channels. So it's all atheists. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm very happy when I see, people who don't believe what I believe participating in the discussion. So I'm doing Atheist of the Month. For this month, for the month of October, is Zhang. And I'm getting ready to announce the next Atheist of the Month. Probably announce that on November 2nd on the live stream that I'm doing. And there's a $50 Amazon gift card for the Atheist of the Month. So anyway, let's get to the topic that I wanted to talk about today. And it really starts with just asking you a question. Who really gets under your skin? Who really bothers you? Think about for a minute, just the people in this world that just really annoy you. Is it people who support a particular politician? Is it people who, fight for a certain cause? Is it people who just do a particular thing that you don't like? Who really bothers you? Who is it that you think these people they deserve the worst? Like you just reject and you just hate what they are about or their character. So the thing that I want to sink in today is that it is those people that Jesus came for. In fact, Jesus would take those people more than he came for them more than he came for the people that you think are good and upright. And that's offensive to people. But that is the message of Jesus. And I want to read and show you where I'm getting this idea. So this comes from Mark chapter 2, starting at verse 13. And I'm reading out of the New International Version, which, some people they don't like this version. It takes some liberties. For me, I like this translation because it's easy to read, but it also sticks fairly close to what the Greek says. It's not a paraphrase. It doesn't add in a bunch of additional stuff, but there are some places where it's not quite literal, where it's more of exchange for meaning rather than word for word. But you're welcome to read out of whatever translation you want to read out of, because it's going to be the same message. So here it is. Once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," Jesus told him, and Levi got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were the Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Jesus did not come to save righteous people or to help righteous people. Jesus came for the sinners. Jesus came for the wicked. Jesus came for those people that you don't like. Jesus came for those people that you don't think deserve help or deserve reward from God. That's who Jesus came to save. That's can be offensive to people, right? And I often hear people complain about this, that, Christianity, yeah, you get to live like the devil and then you go to heaven. Well, that's not exactly accurate, right? Like, God does produce a change in people's lives. When people encounter Jesus, something happens to them. And so they do change. But Jesus did come for those people. And so, for some people, that's not good news at all. Some people think, hey, I'm a good person. I'm a righteous person. I deserve a reward from God. If there is a God, I know he'll accept me. If there is a God, he would know what a righteous person I am. If there's a God, he'll know that I'm a good person, right? And I deserve good things. Well, that's easy to think, right? When you compare yourself to other people, you can always find someone who's worse than you, right? But are you really a good person? Are you really a righteous person? What does it look like to be a good person, a righteous person? So it's often easy to see evil in other people and not in ourselves, right? Like, we tend to think, oh, I'm a good person. Oh, my friends, they're good people. My family, they're good people. We're all just a bunch of good people. It's those people over there. They're the bad ones. They're the ones messing up the world. Well, those people over there also think of themselves as pretty good people. They also think that their friends are good, their family is good. This is a tendency in humanity. We all think that we're good, right? But if we're all so good, then why is the world such a mess? Why is there so much evil? Why is there so much corruption? Why is there so much oppression? Why is it that political movements that start out with good intentions end up doing horrible things? Socialism, these leaders start with good intentions, and then what happens? They end up becoming brutal dictators. So it's very easy to congratulate yourself on being a good person, but consider the way the world looks and why the world looks as it does. Why is the world full of violence? Why is it full of hatred? Is it just because people like the Taliban are killing people? Or does it go farther than that? Is the problem deeper? Well, the Bible says the problem is deeper. The problem is with every one of us. Every human being is contributing to the evil in the world. Every human being is part of making the world a horrible place to live. And so when Jesus says it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick, he's not talking about just a few people who need the doctor. We all need the doctor. We are all sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus did not come for righteous people. If you think you're righteous, then you won't see your need for Jesus, and he can't help you. If you think you're righteous, then this is you've deluded yourself. You may be righteous in some respects. There are people who do righteous things, but there is still a corruption within you that needs to be healed, that Jesus came to heal. Jesus came to restore humanity to what we were intended to be. Hi, Nathan. Good to see you. You want to jump on the stream? I thought Rob was going to join too. There's only like a few people watching right now. But so Jesus came to heal. He came to restore humanity. And what's interesting is the more that you get to know Jesus, the more you realize the corruption that's inside you. It's easy when you're just comparing yourself to human beings to overlook or to not even see the corruption that's inside you. But a pattern that I've noticed is that, people who don't know God, people who don't connect with God. Oh, oops. I gave you the wrong link. Sorry. I don't know. Okay, hold on. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, when people start getting to know God, they start coming in contact with that true righteousness. And it's easier to see the corruption that's within yourself. So, but God doesn't want people getting weighed down with guilt about the corruption that's inside you. He came to give you a solution. Jesus does give you that solution. And so, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. So God doesn't want us to get weighed down. If you're one of those people where you have realized the corruption that's within yourself and you're frustrated by it and you're like, why can't I change? I don't want to be like this. I want to do right. I want to be righteous. And, don't let yourself get weighed down with guilt. God has promised you that he's restoring you. He is making you righteous. And so let me just be clear and just share the gospel pure and simple. Jesus Christ died on the cross for sin. He rose from the dead, and he's really inviting you to share in his destiny of eternal life. Nathan's coming on.
Hello,
hi,
Rebecca.
Nathan. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I saw your Atheist of the Month thing, which I've not seen before.
Yeah. Yes. So, Yeah, I'm giving a $50 Amazon gift card to the Atheist of the Month. So I'm going to announce that
Okay, I
on
see.
November 2nd. Zane was for this month. So yeah, how's your new place?
Well, I'm not in it yet. I'm at my parents right now.
Oh, okay.
The we well we were in an Airbnb waiting for V was going to buy a flat, but then there were problems with that. Um, so the sales basically fallen through. So now we're back trying to find somewhere to stay, but it's the COP26 thing in Glasgow, so there's no real short-term places to stay that aren't extortionate at the minute, and
Oh,
so
wow.
all our stuff's in a lockup up there. But we've just come back to my parents. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, cool. How have things been going?
Okay. I mean, I've been enjoying being able to study full time and not doing, a job that makes me fairly unhappy and stuff. But it's also been quite stressful because there's so many things happening at the same time with moving around, trying to find somewhere, trying to complete the course, and also apply for PhD applications and things. A lot of a lot of stuff involved in all of those things.
Yeah. Cool. So is it worked out? Are you going to go for your PhD and do that
I'd
full
like to.
time?
Well, I'd like to. I'm I'm going to apply to a few places in the US actually, because you tend to have funded PhD positions over there. And then I might apply for a few places in Europe. And if not, I don't know, maybe I'd just work for another year, save a bit of money and stuff. How have things been for you, by the way, with your move back to the US? Are you all settled now?
Yeah, we finally got our stuff from Dubai. We were living with, just basically out of our suitcases
Right.
for like 4 months. So we got our stuff. So that was good. Things are going well. Yeah, no complaints. So I'm working full time, which is very different. So just trying to keep up with doing YouTube and doing my job.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about the topic that we're talking about?
Well, I only listened to about the 3 to 5 minutes that I was here before, so I've not got the full thing.
Yeah.
But I mean that's certainly the a big part of Jesus's message, I suppose, that I get from what he seems to be saying is well, I suppose a part of the message that resonates with me is that it's the sort of it's not exactly that it's the exact opposite of what you'd think a good God would do or something, but it's
Hmm.
it's very different to the sort of external religiosity that's even associated with Christian groups who would um, preach the message of Jesus, as it were. But
Mm.
actually, the religion itself, rather than it being about, it can be rather than it being about the intrinsic, you know, care for other people, goodness, as it were, in the world and stuff. It can become more about those kind of external showings, like who was there on Sunday. You've got to be hearing God's word, or
Mm.
who's got the right type of Bible, or you wore shorts to church or something. Those are sort of silly ceremonies and external presentations and stuff of religiosity, I suppose. Um, and I
Hmm.
and I get the impression that Jesus' message is less about that stuff, and less about the outside of the cup and how clean it is, and more about the inside of the cup. And so yeah, so a big part of that message, at least as I understand it, is that it doesn't really matter, where you are. Jesus isn't here for people, who are perfect, but he says he's here
Hmm.
for people wherever they're at, really. And that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. I mean, and I like what you're saying is true about it's more about what's happening, like of course, like the ultimate goal is to, be restored to that goodness and being a loving person. And but like the point that I was trying to make in this is, and I asked a question at the beginning, who are the people that you don't think deserve, like the people that you don't like, the people that you think are really bad, really evil, and like to really think about who is it like that you really think is bad, and like it's those people that Jesus came for. You know, that he did not come for the righteous, he came for those people that you don't think deserve it. You know, I mean, who are the people that really make us mad? You know, is it people who are following a certain politician that is, you know, I'm not going to mention any names, but like, you know, or like people, you know, that are, you know, thinking a certain way or acting very evil. I mean, people who are doing horrible things, like those are the people that Jesus came for. That, you know, Jesus said, I did not come to call, I have not come for the righteous, but for sinners. So it's the people that we don't think deserve it that Jesus came to save. And so that's sometimes hard to swallow, but like that is the passage, you know, when this is exactly what Jesus is saying in the Gospel of Mark. And that's what I was reading from, you know, where Jesus goes to the tax collectors. He's hanging out with the sinners and the tax collectors, and the Pharisees are mad about it. And they say, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? On hearing this, Jesus said to them, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. So how sick are you? And how, you know, that's, Jesus came to heal you. It doesn't matter how sick you are. Like he came for the sick people. And the truth is that we're all sick, right? Like we tend to think of ourselves as being like, oh, I'm a pretty good person. My neighbors are pretty good people. My friends are pretty good people. My family's pretty good people. But you know what? Those people that we think are evil, they also think that they're pretty good people, and they think their family's pretty good people. And so we do this thing of thinking that the evil is somewhere out there, but we're doing pretty well, when the truth is that the reason the world is a mess and full of evil is because it's in all of us.
Yeah, oh, there's fireworks going off. That's what the banging is. Yeah, I guess I have sort of mixed feelings about some of this stuff, because a part of it I can find can be unhealthy, but I think that part comes from sort of more modern interpretations of how to do religion based off of interpretations of what this teaching might be saying. So what I mean by that is I think people can heavily focus on trying to cash out those claims in terms of like an economy of salvation. People use that terminology, or you know, like some metaphysics or something of you've accrued an infinite debt, or you're intrinsically somehow worthless or something because of sin. And I think one of this can be, to use more Christianese, this can be a stumbling block for a lot of people. And the reason I think that is because, I mean, ultimately we don't really, you know, we don't know what the correct metaphysics is that any of this is tethered to, and people get so wound up about that stuff that I think the really powerful, at least the powerful part in that message for me, I mean, maybe I can't talk for other people, is this idea that I'm sort of in need of infinite help or something is something that helps me with my experience of reality, because I sort of want to be better than I am, and I struggle with that all the time, and I have all these vices that are a part of my character. And if I sort of get too hung up on thinking that you know, I've got it all worked out or can do it all on my own, then I have some, I just don't do as well. Now that might not be the same for everyone, and so even if you view it entirely as a kind of myth, having and I'm not saying that is how I view it either, but even having like a kind of mythology of like, I need help to be a better person from some kind of providence or something that my life's a part of, I think can be beneficial. And I think that's the end. I think that's the end of the stick that churches and Christians should probably focus on in delivering this message to people. It's like, well, are you struggling to, like be a better person? Well, like have a change of heart today and turn towards the good, or something like that. And the stumbling block, as I see it, is that people get so caught up in like, how you cash out those claims in terms of like penal substitution or this or that or whatever, rather than the actual like, I think the longing that people authentically have to turn their lives around and try and be better people and aim at living better. So I and with that kind of in mind, I think the words that Jesus has to say actually do resonate with a lot of people, including myself today. But then the way that it's played out in the church can often be quite off-putting to people like myself, because you have to deal with like, I don't want to have a discussion about whether or not you think that that you have this theory of the atonement and these moving parts, but I think these.
Hi, Farrah Cruz.
That tea's ready. So if you want to say anything about that, and then I'm going to have to go and have tea. But thank you.
Yeah, well, I would say you're making a good point, and especially about the penal substitution. And one morning I woke up and I was like, I don't understand the atonement. And so I just went through the entire New Testament and I wrote down every verse that talked about the atonement. And I did not find a single verse that talked about what Jesus did on the cross as paying a debt or as punishment.
I think one of the main things would be like what Paul's got to say. Well, at least that people who are in that camp are going to say, is it like it's around like Romans 4 or 6 or something like that? I can't remember exactly because it was a while ago. And he does say, he uses like a Greek term that actually does mean like about debts being paid and stuff. But it's the reason. I mean, it's not until Anselm that people really start even thinking in those terms. The early Christians thought about it in terms of like prison, like people are in bondage in this life in some sense, right? And Jesus comes into the, I mean, in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, there's the whole like harrowing of hell thing and stuff. Like the metaphor, if you like, or what the language that's being used there is literally of Jesus coming down into like prison to free people. And I think that I don't know, if I find it more interesting as a theology than I do sort of this modern Protestant obsession with people having infinite debt that needs to be paid off or something, which I don't even know if that's how. I mean,
I mean, I'll send you my like, I have the document with like there's 86 places that I found that describe the atonement, and I'm not sure which verse you're referring to about the debt, but I mean, I'm not disputing that, but I will just, in the English translations that I have, it does not, that idea of Jesus paying a debt is not there. There's lots of ways that the atonement is described. It is described as a ransom. It's described as, dying for sins, but, it's described in so many ways. It's described as victory over the powers of darkness. It's, there's many ways that the atonement is described, but I'll send that to you, Nathan, because I think you might enjoy just seeing all those verses together that kind of just, paint a picture of what the atonement does. But I'll let you go have your tea. Thank you for stopping by. It's so good to see you.
It's Romans 4:3, by the way. Just check it. It's when it says, Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. And I think it's logizomai, the Greek word. But, like those issues are all going to be fairly complicated, as everything is in trying to understand an ancient text. But yeah, I mean, this is a problem with trying to do systematic theology in general, right? It's like, what do we do? Just count up verses and put them in each camp and see, like, I mean, you can do that
a lot. Well, I do that a lot because it actually helps me to see the bigger picture. Like when I see all of it jammed together,
Well, I agree. I guess what my point is, though, is that you can do that for like any position, and you can like there's a lot of borderline cases then. I mean, if you're going to sort of count on that as a legitimate way of discriminating between positions, there's going to be a lot of cases where it's like, oh no, there's 5 verses for this and 4 verses for this, and it's not exactly like, oh, okay, I guess it's 1 verse on aggregate, but
but in the case of the atonement, there's 86 verses that describe it in other ways, and I didn't find any verses that describe it as debt being paid or a punishment. So, that, to me, that's a pretty strong case that the idea of it being Jesus being punished for us is not accurate. So anyway, but I'll read that
I'll have a look if you send it.
Romans verse, but I would say just off the top of my head, I don't know. I mean, I'll look at it before I say anything about it. Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Nathan.
great to see you, Rebecca. Yeah, see you.
You too.
Bye.
All right, my brother Doug is here. Oh, Rob's coming on. Hi, Rob. Great to see you.
Hey, Rebecca. Yeah, sorry about that.
Hi. I want to say hi to some people in the chat too. Hi, Zhang. Hi, Dave M, Jerome Robinson, Popsicle Ocean, Roya, Patrick Alexander. Awesome. I'm so glad you guys are here. Randy, thank you. So, Robert, I was reading the passage from Mark about where Jesus says, I haven't come. It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, the first thing everyone should know is that it's a Spartan proverb. It's not original to Jesus. In fact, I'll just bring up my Mark notes. Let's see here. Yeah, so Jesus cites a famous Greco-Roman proverb, healthy people don't need a physician, but sick ones do. And then he repeats that with respect to, I did not come to call righteous people, but sinners. And Plutarch recalls this proverb given by a guy named Pausanias, a Spartan general, when he said, it is not the custom of doctors to spend their time with the healthy, but where people are ill. And so that became like a general statement among physicians at the time. And so Jesus is, because don't forget, Mark is written to a Greco-Roman audience, not a Jewish audience. So when Jesus says that in Mark, immediately they're like, ooh, Jesus is like the great physician? This is interesting. In what way? And yeah, as you see in chapters 2 and 3, he heals people, and yeah.
Very cool. Well, I
don't know what else you shared, but that's I'm coming in blind, so I don't know what you.
I know.
I don't know what you discussed. Yeah.
Now I'm gonna repeat myself for the third time, but I think it's okay because you know what? Most people weren't here at the beginning when I was talking. It was like me and one other person, probably my husband on the other. But so I just kind of asked people to think about who is it in the world that you don't like, that you don't think deserves, a reward, that you think is evil. Right? Like, think about the people that really bother you. Who are the people that you think, why are they like that? They're just evil. They're wrong. They're bad. Now, whoever those people are for you, those are the people that Jesus came to save. Those are the people he came for. And so, we tend to think of ourselves as, I'm a pretty good person. I'm righteous. This is how the Pharisees were thinking. And those people are bad, right? And Jesus is, when we have that self-righteous attitude, what Jesus is saying to us is, guess what? It's those people that you don't like. Those are the people I came to save. And I didn't come for the righteous. So, Jesus came...
Which the irony is there's no one that's righteous. That's the point.
Exactly. Yeah. The point is you're not as righteous as you think you are.
I didn't come for the righteous because there are no righteous. That's the point. It's like, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You are sick. You need a doctor. We all do. And we have a tendency to really think, I'm a pretty good person. My friends are pretty good people. My family's good people. Hey, it's those people over there. Those are the bad people. Those are the Taliban. They're the ones that are bad. See, I'm not like them, right? But in reality, the reason the Taliban, they also think I'm a good person, I'm righteous, my family is righteous, everyone
is this
in the
unrighteous
world
having scotch?
no, everyone in the world is doing that. Everyone. I've been around like murderers, literal murderers, who felt that they were pretty good people. And so people like tend to think of themselves as they separate what they do from who they are. And so we tend to think that the evil is really, it's not really intrinsic to us, but if it isn't me, if it isn't you, if it isn't, the people around you, then why is the world such a mess? Why is the world so corrupt? And the answer is that we are all part of it. You may think that you're not as bad as the Taliban, but you really haven't, you haven't been put in the position that they've been put in. Meaning, like, if you think you're righteous,
because they were innocent at birth. I mean, there was an innocent Hitler at one point in time, and the domino effects that's taken place for him to become who he became. Like, yeah.
So the cultural influences, the other things that influence you, the temptations that you've been placed in, so there's no great difference between us and the people that we think are most evil in the world. And but even if you make a differentiation, then it is Jesus came for those people that you think are evil, the people that you think are worse off than you. Those are the people that Jesus came to save.
That's something I've had to... In fact, I was having a discussion with Christiana that she messaged in the... I was having a discussion with her about, like, literally an hour ago, or like 30 minutes ago, on the issue with my gripe with, say, Ken Ham and the Ark Encounter, and... Because I was watching a documentary earlier tonight on... it's called We Believe in Dinosaurs. It was released in 2019. And I was just having that teacher in me, that sort of like emotional reaction, like, oh my gosh. And there was a slight build-up of anger, I suppose. But then, as I was telling her, at the end of the day, that's not the right way to go about it. And so in other words... Now I'm coming into this, right? And then you're reminding me on that attitude on, just, it's all relative, right? Not relative in the sense of there's an objective truth, but it's all relative in the sense that we're all uniquely in the same boat, but uniquely, right? We all have our problems, and yeah, it's a good reminder. That's definitely for sure. Yeah. Yeah,
and I'll put this up. Pavi D says, I get what you're saying, Rebecca, but I don't think we come close to how terrible the Taliban is. Well, and I agree that, hey, you may not be, murdering and oppressing people in large scale ways. But my point is that, you are capable. If you were put in a certain position, what small ways are you oppressing and murdering people? And I mean that in a metaphorical sense, because, Jesus said, if you've even called someone a fool, like that, you're in just as much danger of judgment. And that is a form of...
Because it's all to do with domino effects. Like, just that one word. There are some people that take it to heart for years. And
go
for it.
And of course, the Taliban killing people, right? That is it has a much greater consequence that we can see in the earth. But if you just consider the situations that people are in, okay, why I'm having a hard time expressing this, but let me just give an example that I often use. I've used it before, I think, with you, Rob, talked to you about this before, but take Bashar al-Assad, right? Dictator in Syria, but did he start out that way? Now he's responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths, millions of displacements, gassed people, has done really terrible things to hold on to his power, right? But did Bashar al-Assad start out that way? No, he didn't. He started out as an eye doctor, and he was sweet and humble, and he loved helping people. He actually, if you watch the documentary that I think BBC or something did on him, like he loved helping people. He loved his job as an eye doctor. He loved giving people sight. So he was a good person at that time, right? But the situation that he was put in brought out the corruption that was actually inside him. And so if you're not the Taliban, if you're not murdering people, if you're not responsible for oppressing large amounts of people, then be glad that you've never been put in a position where you had that much power over people. And who knows what would bring out the corruption that is actually inside of you. If you hate someone when they cut you off in traffic, guess what? You have the same corruption in you that Bashar al-Assad has in him. If you hate your coworker because they, did something you didn't like, guess what? What would happen if you were actually in a position of power? We think that we would be so much better off than any of these, people, dictators who've come into power, and that we would do such a better job. But just look at history as an example, Mao and other people who, do you see what I'm saying? They start out as people who are trying to reform for the good of the people. They start out with a care for the poor, and what happens when they actually get into power. So anyway, that's the point I'm trying to make about, the corruption that's in each one of us. Obviously, I haven't committed the atrocities that the Taliban have, but I don't consider myself more righteous than the Taliban. I know what could be brought out in me if my life situation, if my culture, if my environment was different, and if the temptations were put
it's
before
all
me.
Like, think about it. I mean, there are people saying here, where was it? Oh, like Pavdi.
Okay.
I find it hard to pronounce. I get what you're saying, Rebecca, but I don't think we come close to how terrible the Taliban is in.
Yeah.
Yeah. But here's the point. First world problems. Like, I'm in Australia. And I don't really know too much to say about the American situation, but in our own local vicinity, whatever we do in our local situation, there is a spillover. I'm not saying we should then get some sort of existential angst, like, oh my gosh, that means just lifting a finger will cause this, like a butterfly effect, and then it'll just transfer into chaos on the other side of the planet. The point is, everyone in some way is contributing basically to that, which this is why the Bible, in that very ancient Near Eastern way of talking about it, this is why they talk about generational sins. That's all it is. It's just that whatever your past ancestors did, their actions are spilling over, potentially maybe at the genetic level, depending on how that works, but also due to the circumstantial situation with the culture. And in other words, a really good example of this would be, in action, in practice, would be, say, Joseph telling the Pharaoh, hey, there's going to be a famine. You better prepare. And sure enough, they prepared. And then then Israel, that whole providential act then took place where Israel could then come into, say, the Exodus story and survive. But then notice you have a Pharaoh after that Pharaoh that's a tyrant, and now there needs to now be an Exodus to sort of like salvage themselves from that. And yeah, I mean, and when we read these stories, we sort of just think individualistically, like, just we for example, Moses, we just see Moses the person and that's it. No, there's thousands of people involved with this. There's a whole political structure and country and civilization, and in other words, look at it more in a corporate sense, and the fruit that could be or not be generated. So the Taliban is just one of thousands of pieces of this thing we call planet Earth, with all its agendas and it all boils down to what Jeremiah 17 says, and that is the heart is deceitful above all things.
Yes.
Romans 3, we've all fallen short. Like it just boils down to that.
Well, Zing, Atheist of the Month, thinks that, and he said this about you earlier in the chat. He said, Rob and Rebecca also seems to be contradicting the Bible notion that everyone was born as a sinner. Actually, Zing, what both me and Rob are saying is that we all have this corruption, and we all have, the potential to express the corruption that's within us. It's like being born with HIV. It takes a while to be expressed as full-blown AIDS, but we were all born with the problem, with the disease, and a baby isn't born with the with the full-blown acting out on the sin, but the baby is born with the disease, and eventually that will express itself. So
I suppose a better way of putting it would be, say, the potency to sin, right? So there's the sin nature. But just to clarify, I don't know what you hold on, like what you believe on this, but I don't believe in that Adam's guilt is put upon us.
No.
I think, exactly. So you
not the guilt, not the guilt.
Yeah.
But like, I use the example of HIV because I think it's a good one. If I shoot up drugs, I can get HIV, and I can pass that. If I become pregnant, I can pass that on to my child. That child did nothing, didn't engage in, dangerous behaviors, and did nothing to acquire that, right? But nevertheless, it's passed on. And so we don't share in the guilt of Adam because we weren't there. We didn't do anything. We didn't, we aren't born with the guilt, but we are born with the disease. I think disease is a good way to think about it, because it's it is something, it's spread to all of us. It's something that has spread to all human beings. And
so here's
Dave
a gospel
says,
opportunity. Bring up the comment. If we are born with this disease, that's a gospel opportunity. Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. If we are born with these disease and God is our creator, why isn't God at fault? If I built a house and it was constructed with a flaw, wouldn't that be my fault? Well, you know what? You didn't do anything to deserve the disease. God isn't the creator of disease, but God created you with the potential to do good or bad. And so you weren't born with the disease. And actually, you didn't ask for the disease. It wasn't your fault that you got it, right? But the solution is also not your solution, Pavi.
It's a gift.
God fixed it for you. That's right. And that is what me and Rob wanted to express today.
Yeah.
That the good news about Jesus is that, hey, it wasn't your fault that you became a sinner, and it's also has nothing to do with you to be
To try and
restored to righteousness. Right. Jesus did that for you. So God made the solution and he gives it to you as a gift. He says, look, if you don't like the state that you're in, if you look at yourself and you say, ugh, I don't want this corruption. I want to be righteous. I want to be holy. I want to change. God is saying, here you go. I give it to you. I promised you that one day you will never see this corruption in you again. I'm going to make you holy. I'm going to restore you. And that is what he's doing through Jesus. Rob, do you want to say something about it?
No, that perfectly said. So, I mean, remember when you interviewed me about my testimony? That's exactly the question I had about, at my opa's funeral. Chaos Kampf, what's the solution, if there is? Oh my gosh, whether I like it or not, God is the one that ontologically joins his nature in the incarnation, and then that resurrection stuff, and like that, the whole Jesus thing is this grand, epic, cosmic thing that happens for our sake. And it's like, it's not like all of us, we're shouting and screaming for some sort of like vindication. Where are you? Why aren't you doing it? It's done. And that's why evangelion, good news, the gospel, why do you think the New Testament authors, especially Paul, Philippians 3, now I get it. It's not the righteousness of my own that comes from the law, and I consider it now just dung. So instead, I get it. It's the righteousness that comes from God through Jesus, through his faithfulness on our behalf, because he loves us, right? That whole love language. And then, and all I have to do is it just comes to pistis, faith, trust. That's literally my response to it. And that's it. That's how simple the gospel is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then immediately we start, our reaction is, no, we have to do something. We have to give a bit more to that. Even if it's a tiny, tiny quantum level size thing in response to that, that's a works-based thing, which then is a slap in the face to Christ. Christ literally says to Telestai, it is finished, paid in full.
Yes.
Colossians 2:14, like he's nailed to the cross our record of debt. But that's the gospel. That's it. When Christians get all joyful about it, like Rebecca and I getting really joyful about it, simultaneously we admit it's a mind-blowing thing that it's it is a free gift. We don't deserve it. Mm-hmm. But then it comes back again to, what we, Mark 2, I haven't come to call the righteous but sinners, physician healing. He is the great physician. So great, in fact, that he's doing it without any requirement of a pay or any form of like, oh, don't worry, you can pay me later or something. No. It's a free thing that's done for us. Yeah.
Let's put this comment up. Dave says, I like myself. I don't have a guilty conscience. Well, I'm glad you like yourself, Dave, and I think that's healthy. But if you don't see in yourself any corruption or any unrighteousness that needs resolution or healing, then let me respond to you with Jesus's words from this passage. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. So if you are righteous, if you have no need for a doctor, as Jesus said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. So if you are healthy, then you don't need Jesus. If you're righteous, you don't need Jesus. So, but are you really as healthy as you're presenting? I mean, I don't know if you're presenting yourself as healthy. You said you like yourself. But if you don't see any corruption within yourself, then I challenge you to consider and really think about what is righteousness? What level am I looking at? Because a lot of times we compare ourselves to other human beings who are also evil in action, and then we can say, I'm righteous. But if you consider what righteousness actually is, it's harder to find a righteous person. In fact, I think it's impossible to find someone who's fully righteous. I do think there are people who, are doing good things in the world. There's people who are honest most of the time, who are trustworthy, who, are doing noble deeds. So there are people doing righteous things in the world. Corruption is harder to see in some people, but I think it's still there. Let's see. There was another comment I wanted to put up. Christiana says, do we need a solution for everything?
Very good question.
How do you want to respond to that, Rob?
Well, I'm trying to guess where she's going with that question. I think maybe if we break down the word everything, so maybe Christiana, if you want to clarify what you mean. But so for me, and the culmination of the reason why I became a Christian, the everything for me boiled down to the fabric of this reality that is governed by this thing, again, that I mentioned a moment ago, this thing called chaos conf, the struggle with chaos, just, death, ultimately. It's not that I'm afraid of it. It's just very weird. It's very alien. It's, why should it be the case? Philosophers and scientists like to go into if you didn't have the arrow of time as we understand it, then you wouldn't have this thing called aging or the flow of time, or everything else in the laws of nature that is governed because of this thing we call the flow of time moving forward. And so in other words, it's inevitable, so just accept it. But then my question is, how interesting in that atheist model, yes, this is an amazing reality. The flow of time brings about things like the opportunity to have a dialogue, the opportunity to be creative, whether it's art, music, whatever, technology. But regardless of how much productivity that we provide, with respect to the fact that we're able to do that because of the flow of time always moving forward, there's always an end. And I like to, again, to bring the Matrix analogy in here, when the Oracle tells Neo in the third movie, everything that has a beginning has an end. You see, the end, that was my question. Why should there be an end? Well, if there's a beginning, there has to be an end. But what? That's what frustrated me. Why should there be an end? Because it's a beautiful thing still continuing on as we move forward. Hey, Nathan.
Hello.
And it's been a while, man. It's good to see you. Yeah. And so then, long story short, if the end, so to speak, is then culminated, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, death is swallowed up in life. Like, then that falls into the bracket of this word called everything. Is there a solution to everything? Yeah. And in my opinion, it's Jesus in that sense. But if Christiana wants to clarify, go for it. Yeah.
Yep. Nathan, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Well, I didn't hear a lot of what Rob had to say because I just finished having my tea and came back. So
okay, cool.
Having some scotch.
I only heard the end of it. Yeah. Oh yeah, you
well,
didn't. The Halloween special you were meant to do with Doug. Did that never come about?
Oh wait, was there?
Like a few
I
months
was.
ago. A few months ago, didn't you and Doug say you were going to do like
Oh
a
my
Halloween special?
gosh,
Yeah.
that slipped my mind. I think it slipped his mind. Oh wait, but then there's Halloween still to come, right? So, hey, there's Dan.
Danny's here.
Guys, how are y'all?
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, now
How are
it's.
you?
Oh, we
Now
got a
it's
bunch
good.
of cuties on the stream today.
Yeah.
That's so cute.
Thank you.
Hey, well then it's
Sorry.
Halloween for me, but it's not yet Halloween for you guys, right? So maybe it's still happening, right? So
But I just
Yeah.
ate some of the Halloween chocolate for tomorrow to give out to children, so it can be Halloween for me.
Danny, what do you want to say about this topic that we're talking about? Jesus not coming to call the righteous.
Is there anyone righteous?
Not according to the Bible. Well, there's a weird thing, actually, the Bible does talk about people who are righteous, right? Like the
Right.
Old Testament is full of descriptions of the righteous, like the, aspects, like people who are righteous, they're honest, they glorify God. The Bible has a lot to say about the righteous. And so I think in a sense, there are people who are righteous, but no one is completely righteous. There is, like you have in Romans and in other places, no one is righteous. No, not one. Jesus calls us, hey, if you being evil know how to give good gifts to your children, then how much more does God? So I think there's a sense in which we all have corruption within us, but there are properties and characteristics that God calls righteous.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of interpretations of especially with the dirty rags verse, where like our
Right.
good works are like. I think that I bet Rob could contribute there, but it seems like it's the false interpretation there is that everyone is sort of like by nature like deplorable evil and just incapable of being righteous, and then at the same and then there's like affirmations that there are righteous people. So it seems like there's got to be a different interpretation of that verse. I don't know, maybe Rob can speak to that. The biblical scholar.
well, but specifically in what sense do you want me to?
Well, there's a interpretation of the text, and not just with respect to that verse, that that humans are just beyond redemption, right? Like that, it's true that they can't do anything themselves, right? They need Jesus and they need atonement and all of that. But like even to the extent that we try to do the good, we still fail with respect to this bar of being righteous. There is that kind of interpretation.
Very good question.
Yeah.
If I can add something before you come in, Rob, as well, because this is something, walking back from town today, that me and V were talking about, actually, the merits of a sort of Augustinian versus Pelagian theology, and the idea being, because I saw an interesting tweet from Tom Holland the other day, and this is what I sort of said to V, and that prompted the conversation, was that there's this sort of caricature of the Pelagian versus sort of Augustinian debate, which goes something like, well, the idea of original sin is just this inherently toxic and really evil thing, because it paints this picture that you are just inherently or intrinsically bad in some sense, and so of course that's like an evil way of viewing yourself. It's just not good. It's not whereas if you view yourself as inherently good, then that's. But I do think that is a little bit of a caricature, because there's a sort of positive way of looking at it, right, where it's this sort of equalizing playing field, because in reality it seems like humans in general do have like vices. There's basically no one who doesn't have vices, and so if you sort of if everyone individually takes the position that they themselves are in need of help to pursue the good, and there's something intrinsically wrong with them, but they're striving for it, something like that, then there's this sort of moral equal playing field that everyone's on, or something. And so I do think there's these two themes, and I don't even know that they have to be completely contradictory. Maybe they can be kind of synthesized in some way, but I do think it gets to the core of that theological discussion, like that the interpretive stuff that maybe Rob's going to comment on. It gets to the core of like, well, how should we understand this when it comes to theology? Should we view ourselves as like intrinsically bad sinners or something, or should we view ourselves as capable of doing good, or what are the merits and the pros and cons of either of those views?
Excellent. Everything that Nathan. So the question that Danny raised and then Nathan's clarification is like technically where I'm going to go with this. And this is my musings with respect to, again, believe it or not, even the scholarship. So those in the more traditional bracket, so the Catholics in this sense, and I suppose the Calvinists, who hold to original sin in the sense that, as Nathan was bringing up, this Augustinian idea that we continue on with the guilt of Adam. So there's this, in other words, I believe in original sin, but it's an original sin, not original sin that, I'm just born and it's like, without me even realizing it, I'm tainted, So there was an original sin, right? There was an original sinner.
Like a historical...
Ancestral sin is what the Orthodox view is, they don't say original sin, they say ancestral sin, because
sure.
It's something that we did inherit, but we did not inherit the guilt that comes with the doctrine of original sin. Like with the doctrine of original sin, you have the guilt of actually being a sinner even though you haven't yet sinned, if that makes any sense.
And so but then you see that word inherit, this is where, and this is what I want to answer both Nathan and Danny, this is where it gets quite interesting, but it's also the crux, and there's a lot of nuance. So why do you think the Catholics have to, immediately they understood the logic? Oh my gosh, the virgin birth. We have to have it immaculate. Mary has to be sinless. You can't have Jesus inheriting Adam's guilt.
Yeah.
You see, this is why you have in church tradition all these logical conclusions, like, well, then that means but then you see, if Mary's sinless, but then this is why you have the Protestants.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but then you have to trace it back to her lineage being the sinless, lineage, so to speak. But then the Catholics will respond by saying, no, this is why, when it says she's blessed, it was this moment of like a veneer over her to protect her from that, whatever. And I'm just like, stop with all the gymnastics. The Second Temple Jews didn't believe in what Augustine was communicating. So it's a model, in other words. And Augustine's model in that sense, I believe, is wrong. So I believe in an original sin, but I don't believe that original sin affects me.
So could you have potentially been sinless?
Well, yeah, if we're in that Eden... You see, this is the whole point of the whole Eden narrative versus being outside sacred space. So if I go with that ancient Near Eastern way of understanding what's called sacred space with respect to non-sacred space, so the wilderness outside Eden, we're all outside Eden, to use in that literary context. So therefore, the potential for sin is equal for everyone. In other words, we are blamed for everyone's... So each of us are uniquely blamed for our own actions, which is the point of, I think it's Ezekiel 18, where Ezekiel makes... Because in the Bible, you don't actually see this topic tackled much. And so Jews who respond to Christians, but most of the Augustinian Christians, will point to passages like that passage in Ezekiel, where God tells through Ezekiel, hey, even though you have generational sins, you're to blame for your own sins at the end of the day, which will ironically affect your generations to come. And because don't forget, he's talking in the context of the exile and the reason why they're in the exile. And okay, so but to answer the question then, the gospel then is the realization that, I mean, think about it. Say if the Jesus stuff, like just from a model perspective, say the Jesus stuff didn't happen, where Jesus this language of taking upon sin upon himself, so to speak, and that word sin becomes a lot more complicated because it's not just bad actions, it's not just missing the mark. You're talking about cosmic, entropy and death and
chaos comes,
everything.
right?
Yeah,
Okay,
the struggle with chaos, right? It becomes larger than life in that sense. So he takes upon all that. So then, for example, in Hebrews 10, in verse 19 to 22. So I'll just read this out. So the author goes, "So therefore, my brothers, since we have confidence, keyword confidence, to enter the sanctuary by the blood of Jesus," so to enter it's not just God having a problem with actions and sin, blah, blah. It's literally an ontological, can we even be ontologically in the presence of God, right? So now that we have a type of confidence to enter that presence, the new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain, and then there's a parenthesis that clarifies what is that curtain? That is through his flesh, meaning that whole thing of incarnation, the hypostasis between the divine and the terrestrial. So basically through Jesus now. "And since we have a great high priest over the household of God, let us continue to come near with sincere hearts in the full assurance that faith," notice faith, that's all it requires, faith, trust. So the full assurance that faith provides, because our hearts have been sprinkled clean from a guilty conscience and our bodies have been washed with pure water. You see that, I think that passage just wraps up the whole intent that God, at the end of the day, wanted to achieve. So that, for the first time, a creature that he in his own, in his own economy and in his will, decided to have I want to have a special relationship with this creature. To then step into his presence, God has to take the initiative to do all that he does in Jesus for that to be even possible. But in between the two acts, in between the creation of that creature and the end and the solution that takes place, which is with Jesus, there's a huge drama of all that takes place, which then leads to that, and that includes human sin, and so that would be my response to that.
Do you think Jesus could have sinned or could have done the wrong?
So the same author of Hebrews says he had the potential, but he didn't.
Oh, interesting.
And then, right, Hebrews 4 gets into that. Like, he had the potential to sin, but that's what makes him. In fact, let me just read it.
So in Hebrews 4, he was tempted in every way, like we are.
And the word for tempt there, you can say potential. So there's a little bit of a very interesting dichotomy or juxtaposition where he goes in verse 14, "Since we have a great high priest who has gone to heaven," Jesus, right? Verse 15, "We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses." In other words, remember all the high priests, and in fact, even to use Catholics as an analogy, how you have a Catholic priest that is like the mediator between you and God, like, confession time now, right? I'll be that mediator. No, the author's clear. Human high priests cannot sympathize because they are just as much in the boat that you are in. So, the clarification is, but we have one who in every respect has had the potential to sin as we have been. And this, in some translations, tempted. Yet he never sinned. So, because he did what he did, let us keep coming boldly to the throne of grace. I just love that. The throne of charis. The throne of grace. It's a gracious thing that God's doing because he loves us. So that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. And then,
I'm interested, though. So I think it's been a long time since I looked at this, but when Craig was asked the question, can God sin, or could Jesus have done evil? I don't remember the whole picture, but temptation did come up, and he said that the divine nature of Jesus was not tempted. It was only the human, because Craig thinks that what Jesus is.
You mean William Craig?
William Lane Craig, right?
Right.
What he thinks that is that Jesus is the synthesis of two natures. A man.
He's a neo-Apollinarian, which I am as well.
Oh,
so
okay.
I agree with this. Yeah.
So you agree that when Jesus was tempted, his human nature, it applied to his human nature, not his divine nature.
But I know where Craig is going with this, but I think I'll translate what he's trying to say, which will make you go, oh, okay, hopefully. The neo-Apollinarian view, a lot of the early church misunderstood Apollinarius. They considered him heretical, but I think his model is pretty cool. It's the question on how does the Logos interact with the human nature, and Craig is basically taking Apollinarius' view and upgrading it and saying there is no such thing as a triness or threeness to the human body. So there are people that think of mind, soul, spirit. So in fact, body, mind, spirit. It was actually three things. I'm suggesting, which is what Apollinaris suggested, which is what Craig is suggesting, that the mind and the body are the one and the same fleshy thing, and then there's a second one to it. So meaning humans are two-ness, not three-ness. The second one is that so-called soul spirit part. So what then animates the bodies in that dualistic sense is obviously you and then your spirit in the Christian in that Christian way of thinking. So then Jesus's body, what's the life force is the Logos. Otherwise, that's it. There is no human spirit wrestling or having a tension with the Logos. It's the Logos that completes all the actions and all the neurons that are firing in his brain, and like it's the Logos that's governing what's happening. But this is where it gets really cool and interesting.
Mm-hmm. 1 second, Rob. I want to listen to you, which is why I'm saying this. She's lost her charger. I think I misplaced it. So, yeah. You can talk to Nathan, but
Nathan will get this. Well, I won't spoil it, so I'll just quickly.
Yeah, I don't know what to say because I don't want to derail the conversation by like talking about a bunch of stuff and not letting that.
Because Nathan's in computer science, there's a bottleneck.
Okay.
So there's
You've muted Rebecca.
Yeah.
Whoops,
I'll wait for Danny to come back.
Okay, then I'll say something related to the discussion, but from earlier, and then we can jump back. But it's like the idea of someone being righteous but not sinless. The Bible describes righteous people, like someone in the stream said, hey, the Bible calls Job a righteous person. The Bible calls Noah a righteous person. Does that mean Noah was sinless? No. I consider Danny a righteous person. Does that mean I think Danny is sinless? No. Danny has the same corruption in him that all human beings have, but I find him to be a righteous person. Of course, that's my judgment, not God's, but there are people that the Bible talks about as righteous, and yet none of those people are described as sinless, and many of their flaws and their vices, like Nathan mentioned, are on the pages of Scripture as well. So I don't think, that understanding righteousness as, someone can have the label of being, it can be true that someone can be called a righteous person, and yet it's still true when Romans says that no one is righteous, no, not one. That doesn't mean that no one carries out any righteous deeds. It means that there's no one who is completely righteous in everything that they do and think and say. So,
but just to clarify, it's not. Again, it's the theological model of this language of righteousness, and all that. Notice that it's not so much to do with this thing we call actions. It's mostly to do with the fact that there's, at the end of the day, finiteness to even your righteous deeds. That's the point. The key word here is finiteness. You can do as many... Nathan like some time back when you and I were chatting, and you said you had this huge appreciation for Albert Schweitzer. That's one of the things he realized as a Christian. Putting aside all the critical scholarship, give and take with what he said and all that, but that's what makes Jesus as this archetype is so timeless, and that is he demonstrates in his short life that he's lived on this planet. Yeah, he did a lot of righteous things, and so in other words, a Christian would say he was perfect, sinless. But what about an existence or a relationship with God that encompasses, that it's not just, okay, the sun has set now on that righteous good thing that's just been done, and then that's it, and now we just wait for the next day to happen, and now it's a new day, and whatever happened, In other words, it's not so much that God is fixated on finite actions of righteousness. It's now to do with a status. You, with respect to a genuine, complete sort of engagement with me in a reality that is beyond, I keep bringing up this word, this chaos kampf. Like, that's what the gospel is trying to communicate at the end of the day. That's what Revelation 21 is all about. A new creation. I make all things new, in that sense.
So there's something. Yeah. I don't know if we want to finish the thought that was it a response to what Danny had said before, but I also have. I can do this now or after. I want to share a couple of quotes from Wittgenstein on this point that I find very. I don't know, they're very moving for me personally, and the reason why is because as intellectually interesting as I sort of find exploring, like how might the theology and the metaphysics actually be cashed out from within the system. And this is something I was sort of saying to Rebecca before I went for tea, was that like too many people get bogged down on that end of the stick, as it were, which it's obviously it's an inevitable, and it's an inevitable outcome of thinking about or talking about any of these things. But that isn't like the main part of Christianity, I don't think. I think all that stuff is going to be enshrined in, even on the assumption that Christianity is true, right? From an epistemic point of view, all that stuff's just going to be enshrined in like mystery and stuff that we can't really understand, right? With our sort of brains that deal with like medium-sized objects and stuff like that. So I really enjoy the Wittgensteinian approach to Christianity, and so he has a couple of things to say which I think might play into some of the things that we were saying about as well, like is anyone righteous and stuff like that. Well, he says Christianity is not a doctrine, not a theory about what has happened and will happen with the human soul, but a description of an actual occurrence in human life. For consciousness of sin is an actual occurrence, and so are despair and salvation through faith. Those who seek of these things, like Bunyan, are simply describing what has happened to them, whatever anyone may say about it. And then another one that I particularly like as well is Christianity is not based on a historical truth. Rather, it gives us a historical narrative and says, now believe. But not believe this narrative with the belief appropriate to a historical narrative. Rather believe through thick and thin, and you can do that only as the result of a life. Here you have a narrative. Don't take the same attitude to it as to another historical narrative. Give it an entirely different place in your life. There is nothing paradoxical in that. And I don't know, that those things do certainly have a lot more power for me that are at that end of the stick that's about the phenomenology of my actual experience and how to live, as opposed to, I do get a lot of pleasure from having the discussions from time to time, but only with people who are very secure at the other end of the stick, because the problem is if it's all about the abstract theorizing, there's no appreciation of how like risky that discourse is, and then things get very weird like very quickly, and it can be very that then becomes like an off-putting form of Christianity, and it becomes too legalistic and too I don't know, all the bad things I don't like about religion come out at the other end of the
Nathan, beautifully said. Just quickly before the others jump in, I just want to quickly say, if we go along with that, I'm not saying that that person's suggesting it in a mythological sense, but let's just, for the sake of argument, it's a type of mythology that is so applicable even right now, which is the essence of that quote, right? Like it's happening this very moment, in application, in practice. The more conservative Christian response to that would be yes, and Jesus is the same yesterday, today, forever. In the sense that there's an actual reality of God working with that, like an Acts 17 Paul situation, when he's like he's nearer than you think. We have our movement and our being through him, and he's very close. He's near, and I'm suggesting I would wholeheartedly hold hands with a person that would, or a Christian, let's just say, or someone who reads that and goes, yeah, I want to identify with that. I would consider that person a brother or sister any day. But then at the same time, I would encourage that brother or sister, but in obviously through my subjective opinion, that simultaneous with that experience, the whole Jesus thing, even if you perceive that to be, at the end of the day, say mythological, is a lot more real than you realize. But so in other words, it's a both and rather than either or. Yeah, I mean
Rob,
that's my reaction
to
that.
Continue
Yeah.
what you wanted Danny to hear. What was the subject
Sure.
that we were on? I kind of don't remember right now, but I know you were.
Rob was saying they were that he's Neo-Apollinarian, and that the early church gave Apollonius a hard time. They didn't quite understand his thing. I think
it's all it's all in the context of how does the incarnation work? What's the logic of it? And so to come back to and by the way, did I before I get into this very briefly, Nathan, what I just said, does that help in any way, or like
in terms of, I mean, I value your thoughts on things, right? But
okay.
In terms of, does it like move me from sort of like where I'm at in terms of things
more in a clarification of how I would react to what you just said?
Oh yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Sure, okay. So what Craig is trying to argue, which I think is just, there's no fault to it. I don't see any scriptural or theological fault for it. It makes a lot of sense that Craig is flirting with the problem of dualism.
Did he? I don't think that the whole two natures thing is a dualism issue or topic. I mean, it's not about...
Oh, no. I'm not saying it's a problem.
I'm sorry. Yeah. That was my bad. I'm just always attacked on this view, so I just got...
No.
When
I say heard the word dualism,
yeah.
Dualism in the general sense, right?
Dualism is true. It's true. What are you saying?
Yeah, and also when I use the word problem, I'm just saying it colloquially, like
because you said interaction, which is a problem for interaction. Problem is a classical issue.
Right.
And then I was
overwhelmed. I'm just sort of rewording Craig's, and I hold to this as well, but. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say that, the Rob in me that's moving this hand, that there's a lag, so to speak, between the soul spirit of me and then the actual firing of the brain neurons and, to move and speak. And so it's like we're the driver of the car. This is the car. Craig is saying the Logos is the driver of the body. Which means then there's a bottleneck, if you think about it, because if the Logos is this omni-being that's lurking within this car where he has the abilities to go beyond the car, but he's happy to, and this is the Philippians 2 context, kenosis, empty himself to fit, because think about it, if he's an omni-being, he knows exactly every parameter of that finite object anyway. he knows to the maximum extent of how far to push the envelope, and he works with it ultimately for his glory and for his agenda. And what's that agenda? The whole Christian narrative. He came to die for our sins, blah blah, and defeat death, defeat Chaos Kampf, and so that's Craig's position with respect to the relationship between the Logos and the body. So therefore, the body, when it says he was tempted or he had some form of interaction or some form of bump into the sin problem, well, yeah, because if you nuance sin as beyond just actions, it is actions, but beyond actions in the sense of, guess what? He died. Sin in a Second Temple Jewish context involves even death. Death is a type of chaos, and so he was hungry, he needed to sleep. What about potential things when he's growing up? So then therefore the Logos that's interacting with this shell that is his body, that is natural to the product of this reality, the laws of nature that governs it. That's what makes him so interesting and unique when you then see him engage with the Pharisees and the scribes and all those people that are obviously just at the end of the day humans, and how he always seems to have an edge, but not just an edge, but like a transcendent edge, kind of like a let me teach you something new or something beyond that because at the end of the day it's like you're in this enclosed like echo chamber. And if he's genuinely God, obviously he should communicate a message that not only transcends their local vicinity in that moment, but even a timeless thing, which would involve, as we've seen in the last 2,000 years, Christians that have, in their own cultural context and understandings, applied Jesus's teachings to themselves, which is what Nathan was getting at a moment ago with that with that person engaging with it. Yeah, so that's Craig's Apollinarian view. Yeah.
I don't know. Nathan, are you an essentialist? Like, do you think things have essences independent from like their definitions?
I honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, like I recognize a bunch of views out there, and I sort of slip in and out of various views depending on the topic. I think that this is actually a pretty weird thing about me, is that the more I've learned, like the more and more intractable I've sort of found a lot of these problems, right? And that's just led me to think, like, I don't know what the hell is going on with the world, but it's pretty weird.
That's not just you. That's like a lot of people
That's me as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, in at least in academic philosophy, the more you get into that, right, the more agnostic people become is the trend that I see. And then you don't take any, then people just call you like a not necessarily contrarian, but like as a he doesn't even have a position. So like it's I don't know. You probably see that with some of the people you talk to, right? At least in your program, or they're very, at least they take a very impartial kind of stance in a lot of these issues, right?
Yeah, it definitely depends. I mean, so one thing I found is that, like, you sort of think that a position clearly sort of wins, right, for some reason, and then as you begin to like learn more and more, you realize that the reason that you thought it won is just because like you just didn't fully understand everything that was going on, and that's been the case a few times with things, things like dualism and stuff. Like you start thinking, the kind of arguments that you put forward, right? Not, but a few steps back from that, as you sort of just learning about philosophy of mind or whatever, you're like, oh, come on, these arguments are so kind of labored. There's some easy responses to them, and look at how tight the correlations are, and then as you go more, you're like, oh, I just didn't get that bit, and then I've had a similar experience with. I don't know if you've started reading that Unity of Science book.
No, it's on my reading list.
But yeah, like some of the problems that people are drawing out there in terms of how you would actually like go about a kind of strong reductionist program and stuff have really even like epistemic objections, and there's going to be a lot of effort to like deal with that epistemic objection. And then actual like, well, what are we doing in terms of reduction? Because if we're finding laws at these different levels, well, are we just reducing laws, or how do the laws relate to the actual properties of things? The problems are just sort of endless. And then it seems even that things like Platonism can offer like far better solutions to why some of these like higher level there are laws between these higher level kinds, and something like reductionism can, with like there's just going to be these like weird disjunctive facts and stuff at the bottom of reality. And I found it really weird, and I'm like I've even become sympathetic towards Thomists in some ways, not in how they conduct themselves or anything, but I'm like, yeah, that's actually, as far as metaphysics goes, like that's a really tight sort of system of reality that's actually consistent with almost all of the empirical data that we've got through the science. And so it's just driven me to a position where I'm like, yeah, this really smart person says this really smart person says this. I don't really know where I sit on some of these things.
Well, let me present why I asked and try to tie it to the topic at hand. When we talk about God's nature, Jesus's nature, human nature, right, what we're saying is we're positing some kind of nature of an object, which there's this view in philosophy called essentialism, where either they're objects or subjects that have this kind of essence to them. A lot of people think that we have a sinful nature, a sinful essence to us. And usually what they push forward is saying this kind of essence is not an essence, the sort of essence that comes by definition of the thing. So for instance, we wouldn't want to, there's not a sense in which like a triangle, its essence is that it's a shape, right? But it's by definition that a triangle is a shape, right? But then when we talk about our sinful nature, it seems to be a kind of essence, right? To some, Rob gave an alternative view. Or if we look at God's nature, maybe a better yet example, or Jesus's name. I don't even know what examples to give. I'm sorry. But the point is that it's something intrinsic to the thing, but it's not like by definition.
Are you saying it's not part of its like whatness, like it's what it is, but it's part of its thisness, like it individuates it as this?
Yeah, it's necessity. It's I think another way to say necessity de re. So there's like something necessary to it. Like I'll give you the example in the literature. Water is essentially H2O, but it's not true that water is by definition H2O. So then some people incorporate that kind of essentialist picture to being good or having a sinful disposition. You know, they want to say that we all fall short, right? There's no one that goes without sin, and they try to present like an essentialist picture of this, that for some reason humans are oriented or disposed in this certain kind of way. That's their essence, or that's their nature. But I don't personally, I'm quite against the essentialist program. But I didn't, that's why I was asking, because it's in the context of being righteous, having a nature of a sort that would allow you to be righteous or not allow you to be righteous. That's kind of why I brought it up.
I think it depends. For my point of view is that it's going to depend, right? There are some clear cases where it's very difficult to define a nature, right? Like what's the essence of a game, for example, right? And that's going to be really difficult to sort of get at if there even is one, and that would seem like a counterexample to essences. But then there are some things where it's going to also seem very difficult to come out of essences, and then there's further questions. I think when you start incorporating information from the sciences, right, there's this question of there's epistemic problems that get introduced, like how do you should you preserve the phenomenology of these kinds of that seem to have essences, because that seems to be namely kind of where they come from, or is it actually, should we eliminate these essences because a scientific image of reality is going to not include them? Or is it the case actually that you take into account these higher level sciences and you say that those kinds are actually indispensable, and so by eliminating them you're actually just really committed to this theory for some like bizarre prejudice that you've got, and you shouldn't be doing that actually if you're really a scientist who cares about it's difficult. I don't I think it's maybe it's somewhere in between, you know, where you're going to get there's some essences of things, maybe like more like the triangles and stuff like that, right? And less like
I think it's always somewhere in between. It can't be always like when you use the word prejudice there, you know.
Sorry, could you clarify? It's always in between what, like, Rob?
Well,
Maybe
if
I
I'm
missed something
understanding
that you
Nathan
said.
correctly, I'm thinking of a catalog of already established models and data that we need to keep moving forward with progress scientifically. Otherwise, we are always coming back to the drawing board with nothing if we don't have prejudice. So yeah, but I could be misunderstanding Nathan.
What I meant by prejudice is like when you might consider in sort of someone presenting you a theory, like what's the motivating factor behind this theory, right? So is there some desirable thing that this theory can provide you, like a theoretical virtue or something, right? Or is the and sometimes it might be the case that a motivating factor behind a theory is like just that someone has like a prejudice, like a really strong commitment to some position being true. For example, someone might have a really strong prejudice that, like, I don't know, some spooky soul stuff exists, or a really strong prejudice that you know, physics is the final word on everything, and so everything's just going to be eliminated to physics. And it's like, well, realistically, why should that motivate me to adopt this position? There should actually be these theoretical like desiderata that I actually want.
I'm exactly. Yeah, I was thinking more very loosely, but I was thinking more in the context of the Popper method in gaining knowledge rather than, you know, because when, you know, if someone starts believing all the stuff you just said, that's a very thorny issue because there's a lot of various possibilities of how that person came to that position. Could be indoctrination, could be self-build-up bias on certain things, could be just misunderstandings on certain, blah blah blah. I was thinking more in a very rigid sort of calculated engagement with, you know, the Sandvik method, basically how we come to know what we know, you know, the right way of epistemology. And the irony is we have prejudice even in that, but it's a good form of prejudice. Yeah.
Well, guys, I'm going to have to go to work soon. I'm going to leave you guys to like solve the mysteries of the universe with these deep philosophical concepts. And I have to say, I can't go there when you're talking about all these essences and all this stuff. So that's for you guys to do. But I want to say some final words before I go, just about these words that we started with, these words of Jesus, that is one of my favorite teachings of Jesus. It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. And for me personally, this is very good news. And these words have encouraged me so many times in my life because I do want righteousness. I want to live a life that is good and holy. And yet I find within myself a resistance to doing that, right? There's this wrestling that goes on within me. And it's, there's just, I will say this was good news for me yesterday, as much as it was good for me the first time I heard it. So I'm thankful that Jesus came for people like me who, long for this righteousness, and he's promised this righteousness to me. So even if I don't see the holiness in myself, the perfection that I desire, I know that I have a promise from God that one day I will see that. And I'm glad that in the meantime, Jesus came for people like me. So I will let you guys talk out more stuff. So I can stay for a few more minutes, but those are just
I was
the
going to
final
say, what's
words
your
I
plan,
wanted to
Rebecca? Say. Is your plan to end the stream,
No, I was gonna let you guys talk that Rob said you guys wanted to keep talking, so I said
what if we all left?
No, I was
though?
presuming
What would
it.
happen? Would you just leave it running?
No, the stream would end.
Yeah,
okay.
it's in the stream and we'll be in the back.
Right, I get it. Okay.
Wait, but so I just leave and then can any of you?
It keeps going.
No,
it keeps going until
we can't
leave.
end it.
Okay. Well,
no. The stream ends.
If there's no one here.
Yes.
Okay.
But if it's someone here,
really?
It goes on and on and on.
Well, it ends if everyone leaves the.
It ends automatically if everyone leaves. Yeah.
Really?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but
I'm not sure that either.
Anyway, my husband can come and end the broadcast.
I'm speaking with
It's not a big
experience.
deal.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, but so does anybody else want to respond to what I said, or do you guys have another, area that you wanted to discuss?
All I'll say is that's sort of my, putting aside all the complicated theology and stuff.
Yeah.
In essence, that's it. I share Rebecca's, not positive emotion. I was going to say plea, but in the sense that because of the positive emotion, it's sort of this, like how Mark's gospel starts. It's a voice crying out in the wilderness. It's like this, hey, come check what we've seen. It's not saying that we've seen something you haven't seen, like we're privileged. No, it's just this is an experience. This is what we know, and it's a sort of like a hey, come check it out. It's an invitation, and that's really it. That's literally the gospel, what Rebecca shared. So, yeah. You
have got quite the audience of atheists, by the way, Rebecca.
I know, I love it. Nathan, look, when I look at the channels that my audience watches, it's Pine Creek, it's Myth Vision, so it's like all these channels, and I mean yours is the only one. I have yours on there, which is I would say yours is a channel of atheists too, though, right? Like you have
by and large audience. There's a lot of I guess it's mostly because I do a lot. I'm very critical of apologetics, right? But I guess I don't know. I don't like a lot of the anti-religion rhetoric, and I also I think that there's a lot of it's difficult because religion can be very harmful in a lot of ways when it's viewed too simplistically, in my view. And a lot of the time, I think it can be better for people to actually leave. I'd rather a lot of the as much as I like Christianity, a lot of the Christianity that there is in the world, the world might be better off without it because it's so kind of toxic, I guess, for how it's conducted and stuff. But then on the other hand, I also think that religion is sort of something that's very beautiful and an expression of some of our sort of deepest and most careful contemplation on the fundamental nature of reality and how people should live and stuff like that. And I want that to come through on my channel as well. And it's very difficult because the internet's so polarizing, and a lot of the people who will come and see counter apologetic stuff will be people who have been hurt by religion and are now looking for reasons to not have to deal with the kind of crap that someone like Cameron Bertuzzi is going to try and bonk them over the head with some arguments or something. And it's complicated, but I don't want my channel just to be like some atheist channel or something. I guess I'm trying to move away from that, but I don't know how I do that exactly, because I don't know that I want it to become a really pro apologetics channel or something either. So
well, I really do have to get ready for work, guys. Thank you so much. Nice talking.
God bless you, Rebecca.
For what it's worth, Nathan, I don't really see your channel as an atheist channel. I think that I just think that there is a lack of theists that visit the channel, but I feel like there's just a lack of theists in general that have this kind of present, this kind of level of participation where they go into streams and stuff like that. I don't know why though. Maybe I'm also misreading the situation,
maybe there's a lack of reasonable you know, like I get the sense that people like Elephant Philosophy or whoever are like pretty cool people, and you know they're going to accept the difficulties of their position. They're going to talk about maybe what some of the strengths are that lead them to kind of adopt their position, and it'd be nice to see more of them. But in general, like I don't like I get quite influenced by the views of my audience as well, so that's something that's very difficult. You know, like whenever I do anything that's even marginally pro-religious, you get all the comments and feedback about like, oh, idiot with cognitive dissonance and da. It's like, oh, but
from the religious crowd,
from the anti-religious crowd, yeah.
Oh,
like
really?
like a few months ago when I did that blog post about sort of considering myself an agnostic Christian, I got so many comments about like the king of cognitive dissonance and what an idiot and stuff like that. And
that's so crazy to me.
Yeah,
I mean, like, I don't know, because I think I don't know, when you have, it's true that when you host these, like not you, but like a lot of these channels, there are a lot of unsophisticated religious people, and if they were to come into the stream, they'd get eaten by hyenas. But what happens is that they become havens for these anti-theists and these unsophisticated atheists, and no one seriously challenges them in these environments, right? But there's unsophisticated individuals on both sides. But I think that one of the things that if I ever had a channel where people participated in open mics and stuff, I mean, I probably wouldn't let it go. But then everyone hates you. So it's like, what do you do, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, like you just, you know, like you can be, they're just going to start calling you contrarian, right? I mean, so where do you go from here, right? Either one side hates you, the other side hates you, or they both hate you. And I think.
Yeah, Danny, that's why I wonder why I sometimes attend those StreamYard, moments with the so-called unsophisticated, not only religious but non-religious.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know what I'm talking about, like in recent memory.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I really, you see, I really don't disdain presuppositionalism, but I think I think that I also disdain anti-theism. To me, they're both, there's prejudice on both sides, irrationality on both sides, and I just equally, if I see an anti-theist or something that reminds me of anti-theism, I tend to attack it. But
it seems to me like a lot of the anti-theism, at least, and this might just be because of the way the algorithm has conditioned me on Twitter particularly, right? But a lot of the anti-theism tribes seem to me to be people who are in very toxic evangelical forms of Christianity, right? Have now just defined themselves by the exact opposite of every position that they used to hold, but have learned absolutely nothing morally about epistemic humility and how to. I mean, that's very harsh because I can't categorize it's not, but there's significant tribes of people who would who would be considered like ex-Christian groups and stuff like that, who literally just define themselves as like, well, Christians generally believe abortion, so I'm like now just there's no nuance in it. It's just like now I'm pro-abortion like 100% because Christians are anti-abortion, or it's like all Christians are generally anti-LGBT, so now I'm just pro-LGBT 100%. There's no like, but they only seem to adopt these positions because they're defining themselves as an opposite.
It's all reactionary. I mean, this happened with some of the younger creationist crowd. You have people like Hovind and I'm not talking about the character so much as the sort of intellectual lack of humility and such, right? The poor interlocutor status that these people have that Ken Ham and Ken Hovind, they spawn people like Aaron Ra, right? And
that's what I'm kind of talking about as well, where these and I often find people in the circles of Matt Dillahunty tend to be like ex-evangelicals, but it's like a Baptist evangelical, as someone who isn't American, it's like these two are like the same thing, but you just rip out the propositions and make them different, but the entire like structure.
Yeah. And like I was critical, like one time I said in front of a couple of people that adore Aaron Ra, I said, with respect to atheism, Aaron Ra is just worthless. and I said something like, I would never look up to Aron and in terms of how to be an atheist or how to think of atheism. Now, I stipulated that he might be a very nice guy outside of the conversation. I stipulated he might know a lot about phylogenics or whatever, the sort of scientific fallacies in younger creationism. But to me, that's just like all auxiliary to and then they started criticizing me. Oh, Aron Ra is much more of a atheist advocate.
Well, again, because how good you are as an atheist advocate is defined in terms of converts, because it's evangelicalism, like all over.
Yeah, exactly. And like for instance, and they said like Aron does so much to separate church and state, and get stuff. And I'm like, well, I think that a lot. I can't believe I was challenged on this. I said, well, a lot of Christians and religious people, while there are those that want to kind of fuse them together, a church and state issue is also an issue for religious people, right? We don't want, to some extent, right? Even if it's getting rid of a particular opposing religion in government, or if it's the desire to make sure that they're not oppressed by the government, that's a kind of separation of church and state. And of course, there's like violations, there's inconsistencies and all this stuff. But I said the separation of church and state is not an atheist issue, like by definition, or it could be like a Christian could be just in. The idea here for me is that if whatever issue you're calling an atheist issue, if a Christian can get behind that in principle, right, and if then I don't see it as an atheist issue. I just see an issue as an issue that atheists care a lot about, perhaps, but that's not an atheist issue. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does to me. Like all too often, I see just sort of like simplistic kind of moralizing from people who identify as atheists around like the atheism symbol and all that, and it for me has all the characteristics of religious behavior, basically, but very often as well, it's just not. I mean, of course, there's a lot of very intelligent atheists who have very like challenging arguments for why they hold their positions and stuff. But I'm talking about in terms of the popularizers and the movement that there is sort of online. It does seem to just be really reactionary, defined as just whatever the opposite of what like, Christians believe, basically. And I find it. I've always found it difficult to engage with, really, because I'm just like, well, I don't want to conduct myself like that. I don't want to.
By the way,
like
just to clarify, very an off-topic comment. Is Rebecca in the chat?
Yeah, I think
like
she is. Yeah,
in the live stream chat.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, I sent you a message because since you're in the stream still, if the three of us leave, your stream will continue for hours. That's the point.
Yeah.
But if you leave from the stream, but we're still in the stream,
maybe it'll
as long as
okay.
As long as
I think
as long as one of us is still in the stream, it'll still run. If all three of us leave, then it'll end. So yeah, just letting you know.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think when the stream when streaming to YouTube has ended and the host leaves, it kicks everyone else out, right? But when the host leaves, when the host leaves and it's still streaming to YouTube, it continues streaming to YouTube, right? So
until everyone leaves.
Yeah, I think it would end if everyone left. I think that would work out, actually.
So I'm just thinking of otherwise you'll be having an hours and hours long stream, so.
That's what I did on New Year's last year when I hedged it.
But you fell asleep, right?
I went to sleep. That was a long time ago. But, yeah.
Oh, she's at work already. Okay. Then, all right. All right.
The thing is, she'll ask her husband to do it, and then he'll come and just end the stream.
Oh, no, just press the X. Yeah. Don't.
I thought she was just gonna say not stop broadcasting, but just go offline. Like there's a difference, right? There's like.
Yeah, just press X.
Yeah, leave. She can leave studio. Yeah. She can leave.
But it's live right now. But you can end the stream and people can be in the background.
Oh yeah.
That's what I thought.
But if she left then it would kick us all out. You see.
Wait, what?
When it's not streaming to YouTube, if it has been streaming, right, and the stream to YouTube's ended and the host leaves, then it kicks everyone out.
Oh, I didn't.
Why is
Yeah.
StreamYard so unsophisticated? I mean, I'm just surprised, right? I don't know. Maybe they want that kind of simplistic interface for like boomers or something.
By the way, to bring it back more on topic, oh wait, I can't share because Rebecca's not here. Anyway, I was watching this this documentary called "We Believe in Dinosaurs." It was released in 2019.
It sounds like something I don't want to. Is it going to be like young Earth creationism?
It's by non-young Earth creationists reacting to a 4 or 5 year. It was a documentary made over 4 or 5 years. So in other words, it started when the Ark Encounter started being built, right through, and then they compiled it and made it into this documentary. Which, by the way, on Rotten Tomatoes, it's like 90% ratings, and it's really good.
That's another how to get a million view YouTube video. Atheist visits Ark Encounter. Like that's another like trope of like atheist.
And it's just one of those. There was a moment in there. Apparently, there was a guy, sort of like as part of the main personas in that documentary, that was basically a Matt Powell of Ken Ham, to put it bluntly, who was there right from the start, funding all the way through, and then leaves just before the Ark Encounter is like established and open to the public. Purely because as the filmmakers were progressing through the material, and they encountered this guy, he then started to have interactions with professional geologists and so on that were also being interviewed. And over time, that interaction, because they're all being interviewed in the same room, he started to then change his mind. Now, near the end of the documentary, when they finally journeyed through the Ark, I was literally at the verge of tears and at the same time anger. And I didn't know this until I saw it last night, where since they believe that dinosaurs and man live together, all the pre-flood sacrifices that would have happened in that ancient culture. So we know what animals they used. Contemporary scholarship points that out. But Ken Ham has an actual graphic showing dinosaurs as being the sacrificial animals for the atonement site. I kid you not. And I'm just looking at that going, holy.
Yeah, but this is where it plays into that trope I was just talking about.
Exactly, that's why I wanted to say it. Yeah.
Because if you want 1 million views, what you just do is you like have, atheist visits Ark Encounter, then you just go, oh my god, guys, they actually believe this dumb shit, and like any reasonable person is like, that's Christianity.
But not just that. But a moment ago when you're talking about the variations of atheists and religious folk, and it doesn't. I'm not surprised because, for example, one of those geologists was an atheist. He walks in and he's like, the first thing he sees is Genesis 3 and 4 when it speaks about Abel's sacrifice. It's a dinosaur being sacrificed, according to Ken Ham, by Abel. And I'm just like, well, how is this evangelistic? If that was a goal, right?
Yeah.
Well, didn't he say that it was him or Kent Hovind? I always get mixed up between the two. That when they were debating inspiring philosophy, said that Adam wrote Genesis as well.
That's Kent Hovind.
Yeah,
Ken Hovind. Yeah.
What's actually, but this
God
actually
wrote Genesis 1, Adam wrote Genesis 2. Yeah, it's just.
There's a kind of paradox here, though. If you take the average non-religious person and ask them about this, about certain scientific truths. They're actually going to have not as many how do I say this? Maybe I'll say it this way instead. Yeah, well, it's funny because when you look at a young Earth creationist, they have the wrong conclusions, right, by far, but they actually know way more, if they're interested in the topic, way more about science than the average person. right?
Well, there's just a
Because-
bunch of random facts that they've had to concoct.
Yeah.
Right,
Like,
you're right.
Dinosaurs
Yeah.
existed. There's some fossils, and maybe the average person on the street just doesn't care about those.
Or with
things.
the ID people, right? They know a lot about. Some of them know a lot about molecular biology and cells.
Parts of it, and then you ask them anything off the script. What's the Golgi apparatus? That's my.
But then because I was initially interested in ID theory when I was in high school, and because I studied, I started studying what the cells did and how DNA works. I did all of that, and I could answer that question what the Golgi apparatus does, but I came to an ID conclusion, and of course, that's I was probably not rational for that, but I came to a lot more scientific knowledge than someone that was not interested in theism, atheism, intelligent design, or anything like that. So there's kind of like a paradox there. In terms of how
you learn more of of facts, but you get like more false beliefs or something.
By the way, just very quickly, Christiana in the comment, I kid you not, she's not lying here. There's an actual, it's gone viral. Ken Ham suggesting why T-Rexes had short arms.
What was it?
So he said.
So
he
they
said
can sin or something.
No, they can sin less in this sense. They don't masturbate.
Oh, right.
And
What?
and then I'm like, my immediate reaction is, wow, Ken Ham, the way he, because his long arm. Well, the way his arm extends out to show the T-Rex, right? I'm like, the immediate thought I was thinking was, wow, Ken Ham, you have long arms. What does that imply about you? Like, like short arms to not like long,
That's so bizarre. And like, what God did give us long arms so we can masturbate? Like, what? Yeah.
If you go with that logic, it's just.
Yeah. It's such a mess. I find it so strange. I mean, I wonder if there's ever like any self-awareness for some of these people where they think, am I actually doing more harm for Christianity than good? Like, does he
That's what made me at the verge of tears when I saw young kids at the Ark and kind of sort of going, from show to, or what do you call it, like from thing to thing, demonstration to demonstration,
exhibit or whatever.
Yeah. And then there was a bit where just out of the blue, not only was a dinosaur sacrifice just out of the blue, but literally the next thing was that you have giant men taming wild beasts, and those wild beasts are then killing humans, and then it's kind of like a gladiator scene where you have people sort of spectators cheering on this act, and apparently this was happening before Noah's flood. And I'm thinking,
oh yeah, when it's like Roman-esque like style Colosseum battle.
That is so anachronistic. But
I know.
And then you have parents like young kids in that innocent, the innocence on their face. What really broke my heart was basically that the innocence of these young children.
Because they're gonna form a model, right? Of like that's
exactly.
How reality is. Then they'll learn like 2 more things about it when they're like 12.
And then you see dinosaurs. You see this dinosaur storm into the Colosseum, while there's a Nephilim giant about to pierce a human, and then there's just normal wild beast, like a lion or something eating, and then there's this random dinosaur that charges in, and then the young kids are like, "Whoa!" And that really broke my heart seeing that.
Really, I mean, I just think I guess I have a controversial view about this. I just think it's amusing. I mean,
that's the thing. Christiana told me that it's amusing, but I don't know. Maybe Nathan, or maybe you guys can understand where I'm coming from.
What's upsetting for me is that
I'm the educator in this, right?
What's upsetting for me would be that it presents the dialectic as this like polarized dumbass paradigm of you either believe this dumbass shit or you come here as an adult like streaming about how dumb it is to all your atheist mate, and that's like the discourse rather than Christianity has this like rich set of symbology and ways of thinking about the most important aspects of human life that you can participate in certain ways as like a way of religion.
Okay, yeah, I understand
so much
that.
potential for that.
I understand
the proper
that.
way of doing it,
But
yeah,
I mean,
go for it.
I had some atheists get mad at me because they brought up creationism in schools, and they're like, "What if your child was being taught creationism or young earth creationism in the science class that you were sending them to?" I was like, that would be funny. Like I was just like, I would talk to them about it. It would be like
Oh, yeah.
like good conversation topic, right? Like I just don't take a negative position. Now there are other things that I don't want my kid. I mean, that's not to say there's like nothing that would serve as something that ought not be taught in schools, right? There are going to be things that I'm going to take issue with, but I think like I guess these views about young Earth creationism and flat Earth, to me, it's just like if my kid was being taught it, I'd be like, really? Like,
yeah, so some people get really reactionary about that stuff. Like, yeah, I'd be down there with the militia and we'd be shooting.
Yeah, I'm just like, just correct them. Make it an exercise. I don't know. Like,
well, yeah, there's like an underlying like. You've offloaded all responsibility for for bonding with your child and educating them to the school. I don't know that I'd necessarily think it's the best thing the school could be doing.
But it wouldn't be. I wouldn't be outraged. I would be outraged about other things. Absolutely, right. I'd be outraged. Right, I'd be outraged if they were teaching atheists are dumb, toxic, or if they were teaching theists were dumb or toxic, like that kind of stuff. Like what you're pointing to, Nathan, is that if they're doing it in a way where suddenly there's a polarization and they hate, now my kids hate Christians or they hate atheists, then I have a problem, right? I don't want any of that. But if it's just like some misinformed science teacher, right? Like, yeah, and they're not really saying anything that creates that polarization, then I really don't care. I'd take that opportunity to grow with my kid.
I don't know. I guess I would definitely prefer that science was taught properly, right? But I also think, I don't know that I'd prefer that it was taught wrong, but I do think that there's something really interesting about learning the wrong parts of science to then get to the true parts. Because what I think the problem is that if you spoon-fed contemporary science, then you sort of lose the pessimistic meta-induction, right? You sort of get you think, oh wow, this stuff's so powerful, that's definitely true, and you don't realize all of the like web building of beliefs and stuff that's gone on historically and how, I mean, even though
that's the unfortunate thing about
it, pretty
it.
powerful.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
By the way, I'd hacked a way of doing it. So here's a screenshot of the documentary of the camera lingering on that exhibition about the Abel sacrifice, right? Dinosaurs being sacrificed for the sins of the world.
They look tasty. I mean, no wonder the aroma was pleasing to you.
Here's Adam and Eve being cast away.
And Eve looks cute.
And then Abel doing this. I mean, for goodness sake. Like,
that's hilarious.
Look at the sort of artwork on the dinosaurs, like
I know
the kind of the expression on their faces. I saw something interesting where, the people who do the artwork for what dinosaurs looked like, someone gave them the skeletons of like rabbits and cats and stuff like that to work with, and they drew them, and they all looked absolutely horrifying. And it's because like when we've just got the fossils and stuff, and we say do artistic reconstructions, and they actually might have looked kind of cuddly and cute or something.
I kid you not, they were literally dialoguing about, because Noah's family are like the progenitors of basically all humans, because they believe they're the only ones that survive. So you have the art department doing a computer algorithm simulation thing of all the races and all the skin tones and all the face shapes,
blacks and whites,
mashed into this Adam and Eve. I mean, a Noah and his wife, and the sons and their wives, and so in other words, notice that they're not doing science.
How do they explain black people? Do you know?
Yeah, I don't know. They just it's preloaded. Don't forget. So
an evil son or something. It's gonna be
genetically it's preloaded. So yeah.
And I kind of want to leave the stream, but so how does this go again?
If we leave, Rebecca stays, and it's just going to go on until she leaves.
Well, she can edit it. You can edit that in YouTube, right? It's not a big deal.
Yeah, but if it's like if it's like a 10-hour thing or something, that'll become really difficult to edit. Like YouTube,
really?
Yeah, it breaks down at that point.
Oh, but she's not going to be gone. She's not going to be at work for 10 hours.
Hope not. I mean, her husband, she said, is going to come and turn it off. She says
But-
we can leave.
Danny, before you go, I hope I was able to clarify whatever Craig's, thoughts that you had about Craig or questions you had. Like,
Oh no, I mean fundamentally,
sense.
it's
Yeah.
the reason why I brought essentialism up is that all of this is kind of presupposing some form of essentialism,
Sure.
and so there's a more fundamental question for me. But I was kind of like starting. Okay, if you're an essentialist about these things, then it's a synthesis of two essences, and in this idea of one operating, like temptation operating on one essence rather than another essence, seems like a clever move, but then it kind of makes me think about, well, then how does essence work exactly? What does it mean to say that?
Yeah, can I clarify? The body of Jesus was continuously. So again, the Christian theology will say, night and day, every second, we're like slaves to sin, as Paul would say in Romans 6, 7, and 8, right? So in fact, he'll go even further than that. There's nothing good in me. It's every part of our body is like a slave to this. All right. So that being said, again, defining sin as being not something we inherit, but something to do with the actual ontological fabric of this reality that we're part of, that gives us this natural drive to do that. Jesus's body was very naturally prone for that. But what was then coming literally in a head-on collision was in that hypostasis where the Logos is like, hey, I'm not you, but I'm going to work with you. And that's the point of Hebrews 4. Even though it would be very natural for him to be tempted, because guess what? His body's part of it anyway. It's not that he inherited it. It's just the body is part of the system, which is the universe.
I think I understand.
And then he overcomes it, basically. So
I wanted to. Rebecca is frustrated. She says in the chat, but guys, I will say that I find it frustrating that none of you directly address Yak when I'm present, but do it on my stream after I've gone.
It wasn't on purpose. It wasn't on purpose.
But I do want to get my thoughts on Yak for a second, right? I don't look, if I debated a young Earth creationist, even if I went, Rebecca, you might even more know science than I do, right? You might just put me in a position where I'm not going to be able to say that you're irrational, and I'm going to have to say I'm depending on the consensus. But that's how I see it, right? If a conspiracy theory, like let's take people that think that 9/11 was a setup, right? They've studied the issue, right? They've studied the issue way more than I have. So if I debated a conspiracy theorist on 9/11, and remember, this is just how I see it, right? I don't know. I would probably get decimated in a debate, right? Because they know way more about 9/11 than I do. But you see, I'm just the thing is that what am I going to trust? Their testimony or or their sources, or the sort of sources that are, and so that's how I see it. It's not anything like, I'm not even saying you're rational
or something. Look, I don't know anything about Bigfoot, so someone who's really into it is going to be able to absolutely like steamroll me with like random facts about Bigfoot that they spent the past 10 years.
Or Dune.
Yeah, so I don't really even think it's like it's a thing that I like. Do I think you're irrational? No, I'm just saying that I have a choice to trust your testimony or the testimony of these scientists, right? And I'm sorry, I'm going to make my choice there. In the same way that you would probably, if some conspiratorial person about 9/11, you're going to do the exact same thing, right? You're going to trust the testimony of the United States government and military intel over the testimony of these random sources that the conspiracy theorist is operating on,
Yeah, I think that's right. But I do think there's even more reasons. It's not. There's even more. It's even more difficult for the YEC position because it's not like the body of experts is like this small. It's like a multinational, right? Every university, like several different branches now of biology and chemistry that study and touch into this thing. Like there's a massive amount of an overwhelming amount of evidence in the other direction from experts in different fields with mechanisms built into like their way of doing things to make sure that the biases are being reduced and that things are controlled for and stuff. So that is like a really good source to trust. If there ever is going to be an appeal to authority that isn't fallacious, it's going to be something like that, right? or the magisterium. But
Yeah, for better or worse, I just view young Earth creationism as a conspiracy theory. I really do. I mean, and I don't argue with
I agree.
conspiracy. I don't
Yeah.
argue with conspiracy theorists. I'm just not interested, right? If you want to argue about, theism, right, then that's one thing, right? But I feel like
do you remember who was the guy that came on? Was it Answers in Reason or something? The guy that came on Rebecca's channel.
Answers in Atheism, that Mike?
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I just remember some guy who said that the speed of light was instant. And I'm like, as soon as someone says that, like, I know so much about the way I have so many beliefs that I would consider to be knowledge, right? About the speed of light moving at a speed that is temporally it's here, next moment it's not. That, like, as soon as you're saying that, like, I can't even consider any of the other things that you're saying, because it's just so crazy that the speed of light is instant.
Yeah, the credibility goes down the tube.
Yeah, and that's something that you need to do to get this, like, theory to work. That's got already a bunch of other risky claims. You need to, like, overhaul all the
that was
really
an atheist?
physics.
This wasn't. Okay.
Yeah, this was a young Earth creationist who was saying the speed of
okay.
light is instantaneous.
Yeah, I don't know anything about.
Yeah, in fact, I was in dialogue with him about it on LPP.
Was that Redefined Living then, Rob? Who was that?
I don't know. I don't know who Nathan's talking about, but I.
Okay.
Was just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'm sorry, because
Lyle. You're talking about Lyle, right, Nathan?
I don't know who the guy was, but it's like, I can set up an experiment with just the crap I've got here. Like, that will show you that the speed of light isn't instantaneous. You don't, like. By the way, it's ridiculous.
I had a few physicists lurking behind the scenes, just lurking, and they private messaged me. This is to Danny, because I think, Danny, you were there, right? You were witness to that discussion.
I'm omnipresent, so I lose track of where I am.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm in all these streams, and I just lose track.
Yeah.
Well, the very yesterday?
No, the one where I was talking to Redefine about the.
Okay, yeah.
In fact, Rebecca was there as well.
Leo came in, right? Leo came in.
Leo came in.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. And I had from the American Scientific Affiliation a person, which I won't name, but he's just like, man, the patience you showed in that. Because Leo just comes in after like an hour of trying to explain to him what it is. Leo just brilliantly goes, you know what, just put everything aside. It's ironic. If you go through the anisotropic convention, you still have to affirm, Einstein's relativity and his conventions as an established thing in order for the so-called instantaneous velocity of light to even work. But even more so than that, which is what I try to explain to Redefine, which Nathan will understand as well. If you go instantaneous one way, it has to conserve the whole thing to work, it has to go half the speed the other way. But it's not that it's doing that in reality. It's doing that on paper. The math says that. That's what I was trying to communicate to Redefine. That's what Lyle, for some reason, thinks. I mean, Lyle understands it, but Lyle literally thinks, no, because God is the one, pulling the levers. He makes it that it's instantaneous, and so therefore it's a young, universe, even though there's vast distances. And you see that. Anyway, I don't want to, especially on Rebecca's channel, I don't want to, but it's.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Rebecca, about the
discussion.
Yeah, but we could talk about it later.
Well, it's kind of like there were these theories about I forget what it was. I think it was the moon, right? When people started observing like things to do with the moon having craters or something, and it had been hypothesized that it was like smooth for some reason. And then someone posited, well, there's like a clear liquid, there's a clear substance. So the moon is actually perfectly spherical, but there's a clear substance that sits on top of the craters and makes it, like it's more ad hoc than that, to preserve the perfect sphericality of the moon. Some of the stuff that the young Earth in terms of like just looking at clear paradigm cases of where there's like an obvious counterexample to a theory, and someone's just willing to just say anything to preserve the theory. To sort of like conclude on this topic, and I won't comment on it anymore. But when Danny mentioned that
it comes across to him as a conspiracy theory. So in that documentary I saw, the guy who was a big supporter of the Ken Ham arc stuff, and then he leaves, the psychology of the way he described it is just really interesting. He says, when I was in it, you're not actually taught science systematically, from an A to Z, and then bang, go and utilize this in your PhD research if you want, and then on you go, you become a scientist. Rather, it's you're given packaged, piecemeal, bite-sized information, answers, right? So you can't really do a proper synthesis of all the material. And then what you're trying to do is you're trying to be correct all the time. And now that he's pulled himself away from that and is now a more critical thinker and is doing law as a non-young earth creationist, he's still a Christian, but he's definitely not young earth. He goes, I feel so liberated, because now the irony is I find more value and meaning when I acknowledge that I don't know, that I don't try and constantly be correct all the time. Rather, I want to be wrong, because that's the journey. It's like, okay, I'm wrong. Okay, room for improvement, The young earth creationists literally claim themselves to be basically omniscient, all-knowing. Like, this is it. There's no room for improvement. That's
I find it strange,
the difference.
The inconsistency between the inconsistency in, like, well, I'm so certain the Bible is saying this about biological kinds and stuff, right? And then, like, all of the stuff about ancient Near Eastern cosmology or the way that they thought the Earth was and stuff, they're like, oh, no, you've got to take into account the context and ancient Near Eastern culture. I find that to be another super ad hoc thing that gets done by people who take that view, because it's like, why? The author doesn't. There's no note in the side that says take this part literally, right, in the way that you mean literally, and then don't take this part literally. It's ridiculous.
There's no index at the side of the scripture from the original authors of the Bible saying, by the way. Like what Travis is saying is perfectly just as summarize what I just said. Certainty is tiring. I agree. Yeah.
Are you certain about that?
Doubt your doubts. You got to doubt your doubts.
Sorry, I had to do it.
Yeah.
It's like the first thing when someone discovers, philosophy. The person
is
like,
that true?
Yeah. Like there are no objective truths, and then they're just ready. Oh, is that true? Like they just they have to look for self-reputation and everything.
Yeah. There's no absolutes. Are you absolutely sure?
Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna play Ages of Empires, Rob, later. So
I'm re-downloading the game, so I don't know.
I was supposed to write half my paper this weekend, but it looks like I'm only gonna write a quarter.
It's going to take about 2 hours to download because I'm re-downloading it. So it's 5% right now, 3.7 megabytes a second. So.
Anyways, is Danny 100% a troll? No, just 50% a troll.
50% divine.
Yeah, they were calling me. There's this channel, right, that they were saying I was being disingenuous because I'm trolling them, but I was like, well, you can troll someone with the truth, right? Like, couldn't you? Like right there, like, are you absolutely certain?
I find troll to be so many people have different meanings of troll. Like I take troll to be someone who's doing it deliberately for the provocation, right? Whereas I find often the way that most groups who seem to use the term troll define it is just someone who is like has different opinions to me and is behaving counter to my goals.
But those are not mutually exclusive, right? Like, look, if I know, like if there's someone that's like a strong, like dogmatic anti-theist, right? I think it's true that anti-theism is false if it's understood the way that I'm construing it. But I deliberately want to infuriate them with that fact, right? Like, so it seems like I am if my goal is to infuriate them, but I'm doing it with a belief that I take to be true, then I think there's a sense in which I'm trolling, but I'm not being disingenuous. Right?
I agree they're not mutually exclusive, but I think there are definitely cases where people just disagree and then they get branded as trolls, and that really annoys me. It's the Darth Dawkins tactic, right? And it's even some atheist mods and stuff will do it. Will be like, yeah, this person's a troll, don't give it, and they're just like, no, I just disagree. Like,
yeah. Good stuff. Okay, well, I'm gonna take my leave. Thanks for the
you're
conversation,
addicted to
guys.
that game, Danny. Your paper's more important.
True, but
Nathan,
I'm being a
I can stay on for a bit. I think
Sure.
if you want to talk properly.
Yeah, I'm.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, okay. See you, Danny.
See you, Danny. I don't know if you've got anything else on or what
No.
is going on.
I mean, it's 3:30 in the morning. It's 31st of October for me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How have you been? It's been a while.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I've been in Glasgow for a month. I'm not now. I'm back in Manchester now, but doing my master's in philosophy, and that has been good so far. But no housing there, so I was in an Airbnb for a month, and we were waiting for V was trying to get somewhere, and then that fell through. So we've had to come back to Manchester, and it's that COP26 climate change thing. So it's just it's so expensive right now to try and everywhere's so oversubscribed. So we're just trying to get somewhere to live, and then now I'm just trying to apply to PhD programs basically and get my applications together, as well as having a few essays and things to do for my courses. And then I've got to do this GRE test, which is a bit crap for American PhD programs. So I've been studying for that a bit this weekend, and that's basically been it with my life, really. I've gone to a few Catholic mass services. Those have been interesting and fun in terms of religious type stuff. Cycled a bit more around places. I don't know. That's about it. How about you?
Yeah. I mean, I've been house moving. Curiously, a lot of, well, as far as studies and all of that goes, not to the same aggressive, intense stuff that you've been going through. Mine's more laid back as of recent, but yeah, working behind the scenes, the study stuff. But then the big thing was the moving, building house, and where I'm moving is curiously a lot of biblical names. Like there's this suburb called Eden Beach, and it's right next to Trinity Boulevard and Alabaster. I'm on a road called Alabaster Way, and yeah, it's just interesting that making the big move in light of very surface level, laid back observations of that. So as far as anything more exciting than that, or more, I don't know, intellectually stimulating, not so much. I mean, I've still been behind the scenes writing my commentary through Mark. I'm up to chapter 12. I've recently, in fact, last night I interacted with the ASA, the American Scientific Affiliation of top of the range science communicators and engineers, and like, for example, one particular guy who's like the engineer behind the cameras associated with the Mars rover, Roger Wines. So there was this big Zoom meeting just to catch up, and all of them sort of got together just to like share sort of like a summary of the year's end, and I was invited to that through a friend, and that was really therapeutic in the sense that it's like I'm in a room with people who are well-established professionals, but they're also Christians, and it's therapeutic to sort of be in that environment, right? So,
yeah, it's very. I find it very difficult when you take. I mean, I'm sure you find the same when you have like more nuanced views of things, and you're constantly having these conversations with people who take like hardline positions on very risky subjects, and it can be very exhausting. And it's nice to have conversations with people who sort of can see,
it's just that they're more down to earth, literally, in the sense, not to be derogative, but their heads are on their shoulders. They're not like the woo woo way of looking at reality, and and they're Christian. So and I guess that's really it. Like, I did a few live streams here and there. I'm also just jumping in and out of live streams. I've been engaging more with what you would call the fringe group of people, like young earths, flat earthers, and sort of just killing time, just going in there while the house move was happening. And but yeah, that's been about it.
That's good, man. Spartan Theology, if you are there, Rebecca's not here, by the way, so she can't let you in. If you Rebecca has gone, so
apparently her husband will come in, but that's the thing, he'll have to let you in.
So... that looks,
it's possibly
like
wait, don't leave. if it's Jeremy, don't leave.
It's Jeremy.
Hey, there you are.
Hi guys,
how you doing?
Good.
Put a link.
Yeah. So I'm here to having an official close to the stream. So
as in the stream is closing?
Coming. Yes. Yeah. So
okay. Yeah. Then Spartan and also Digital, they can't come in. So
yeah. Sorry guys. Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and I wouldn't even be remotely equipped to participate in even the simplest of your guys' dialogues, regardless of the attendees. So, I'd be definitely a poor replacement. So, anyway, but thanks for coming. I'm going to go ahead and close it out.
It's good to meet you, Jeremy.
Yeah, you too. Yeah.
Do you know how to end it, by the way? It's the end stream in the top right button.
I see it. I see it there now. Okay. All right. Thanks again, guys. And all everyone watching, have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Rebecca.
See you in a bit. Thank you.